Ambassador Ido Aharoni is ending his term as Consul General of Israel in New York after 6 years. Ambassador Aharoni has been a dedicated civil servant in the Israeli government for 25 years.
Ido Aharoni. You only have to walk into his office and see the photo of his father in the desert with the founders of the State of Israel to understand that this is a child of pioneers and somebody who feels so deeply above a political level about the job that he's doing in the state that he's doing it for.
Ido was the consul for media affairs here in New York. He stood out, not just because he's so tall, but because of his ability to communicate. And I think that's really been his great strength.
It was pretty clear to me from very early on when I saw him scurrying around the consulate that this was going to be a rising star. He was a little more hair, and between us, I think he was a bit trimmer.
First, as acting consul general, I was so impressed with his gifts and talent that I said, Ido, you're not going to be acting, you're going to be the consul general.
And indeed, he became the Consul General. Ambassador Ido Aharoni officially assumed the post of the Consul General of Israel in New York in February of 2011. He was acting in that position since 2010. And he served as Consul General during many huge events that took place in Israel. We'll talk about it because the man is here. So good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, my friend.
I'm telling you, and I find it hard to believe that you were ever in better shape than you are now. What they say, a little less weight, a little this, a little more hair. You look great.
Thank you.
Do you feel like, I mean, what does it feel like? You've been honored. Your tenure ends next week. And you and I go way back, many years. But you've been honored right out and through this month and last month, and as the end of your tenure approaches, all these tributes. And what does it feel like?
It feels great. It feels like you're being rewarded for the hard work that I put in, that the staff puts in and day out. And I've been in this business for 25 years. 25 years of service to the community. You're not only representing the State of Israel in the United States, and I've had the privilege of living in Boston, LA, twice in New York, 16 years of work combined. And it's all about serving the community. It's all about being available for the community.
And when you say the community, you're not just talking about the Jewish community. You've done so much outreach that I know about. I don't know how much of it you've made public, how much you want, but feel free. Where you've reached out through in your position to other ethnic communities to try to make them understand more about the State of Israel and the Jewish people. And I think you've done wonderful work towards that end.
Well, our job, and this is really what makes a consulate different than a government. We don't deal only with government, with state government or municipal government. We also deal with people to people. So my job was to build bridges to communities, religious communities, within the Jewish world, within the Christian world, within the Muslim world, ethnic communities, the Latinos, the African Americans, the Asians and others, gender groups, the LGBTQ community. It's a wonderful relationship that we were able to develop over the last 6 years here in New York and elsewhere, as well as other communities. So you're building bridges that are based on background, based on beliefs, engaging in a language of faith, which is extremely important. And I have to say, it's the best job ever.
Yeah, and when people ask you a lot, what does a consul general do, right?
Exactly, and I tell them, I am the guy who gets paid to brag about his nation.
Not a bad gig. But as I pointed out, you served as Consul General here in New York during Operation A Pillar of Defense. That was in November of 2012. Operation Protective Edge, that was in July and August of 2014. You also served as a Consul for Media and Public Affairs during 9/11. So you've been here during real tough times for us, tough times for Israel. When you look back, talk about some of those experiences and how that makes the job that much harder or that much different.
Well, 9/11, of course, is an event of biblical proportions that changed everything as far as Israel is concerned. Why do I say that? Because after 9/11, the whole notion that the only event that explains events in the Middle East is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict basically suffered a major blow. Right. The old age argument, which we call the linkage argument suffered a major blow as a result of 9/11. 9/11 also created new divisions in the Middle East. And then, of course, you see what is happening nowadays in the Middle East. We see this eruption of instability, violence, tension, and strife throughout the region. You see several Arab nations disintegrating in front of our eyes. And you ask yourself, why is it all happening? And of course, the answer has nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It has everything to do with an age-old rift within Islam itself.
Yeah.
And so 9/11 was an event that really changed everything, changed the positioning of Israel, changed the positioning of the Israeli-Palestinian / Israeli-Arab conflict in the world. And with it, of course, there was a need to change the strategy. And so we implemented here in New York, starting here in New York, a new strategy that says, basically, Israel is more than just a conflict. There is way more to Israel than its hardships, than its tough geopolitical circumstances. Israel is a real member, contributing member of the family of nations. Let's celebrate that contribution. And with that, we approached the various groups that I just mentioned.
Right. Yeah.
And I have to tell you, the response was overwhelming.
The Gaza war, for instance, you know, and this has been consistent throughout. When Israel's attacked and they respond, this new way of fighting wars. You know, in World War II and your War of Independence, you know, you killed the enemy. Now, if you kill the enemy and you kill a civilian, oh my God, Israel killed a civilian, or even we won't go and do something because it's in a civilian area. So we, in fact, are now legitimizing the terrorist strategy of hiding among civilians, firing from among civilians, you know, putting explosives in hospitals and churches and mosques and whatever. And Israel has come under some of the harshest rhetoric because of their defending themselves against those tactics. How do you combat the perception there?
Well, it's clear to every person who's really interested in knowing what's happening in the Middle East that the Palestinian leadership, certainly the leadership of Hamas that is now effectively controlling Gaza since 2006, for 10 years now, have nothing to do with the better future for the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Hamas is not about a viable Palestinian economy. Hamas is not about a better future for the Palestinian people. And in fact, when you look at the leadership of the Palestinian National Movement, the Palestinian Authority, you can clearly say that if they wanted to bring about a territorial resolution to the conflict, they could have done it three times, at least three times. Only in the last 15 years since the Camp David summit of the summer of the year 2000.
Right.
But the truth is that the conflict is not about land.
No.
It's the sad reality.
It's about getting the Jews. It's really what they teach their kids.
Our very right to exist.
Yeah.
And as long as our neighbors, as long as our Palestinian counterpart will not understand that we have a right to exist in the Holy Land as our national homeland,
then they can never really be
exactly.
Peace. I don't know what you're going to do after you're done, but I have a clue as to what you might pursue as a career. Let's watch this.
Ido was my right hand when it came down to building a relationship in Israel. He schooled me in a way that was beneficial for myself and also for Israel. And it's been a great relationship so far.
I think what makes him different, one, he's the tallest consul general I've ever met.
He makes up stories about being a basketball player, which he has not a clue.
We're both frustrated former basketball players who, in our minds, should be starting at small forward for the New York Knicks. Come to think of it, we probably could start for the Knicks right now.
Humongous basketball fan who understood our game, I think, better than I did. Whenever I visit with him, if it's an hour, it's 55 minutes of basketball and a dissection by him of the game and every aspect of it.
He knows players and teams, and he knows how to play the game. The strategy that's involved in the game of basketball. And it made it an easy transition for me to communicate with him because he was so openly fun to hang out with.
We get together and we talk about hoops. We get around eventually to the Middle East, but mostly it's about Carmelo Anthony and why some obscure Israeli player should be in the Hall of Fame. Here's to Doron Sheffer.
He's a passionate fan. He's come to many of our games over the years, and we've used the opportunity to talk about how through basketball we can bring people closer together, not just in Israel, but throughout the world.
So you're going to be commissioner of Israeli basketball, or what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
If it was up to me, I would still be playing. But, you know, I really believe in sports. I believe in basketball as a bridge builder. if you remember, we said the essence of our work is to build bridges.
Yep.
And I think the NBA has a great program called Basketball Without Borders. I'm a huge believer in the power of the National Basketball Association. I think the United States has a great asset in the NBA because the NBA is the fastest growing sporting brand outside of the United States in the world.
And what are your immediate plans? You go back to Israel, we got 30 seconds. What do you?
I'll be doing some teaching, which has been my passion my entire life, and I'll be doing some business, and I will always be available to you here.
I was just going to say, and I will always call on you. I value our friendship. Best of luck. You're a great man, and I'm honored to know you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the Consul General of the State of Israel in New York, and he's going home, and he's going to do great, great things. I promise you. Thank you again, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.